Welcome back to El Jefe TV channel, and this will be the third session of the interview in my visit to Audio Group Denmark. I'm very excited and happy to be able to meet with the three big guns in Audio Group Denmark. Um, this just now was a interview with Michael Borsen, and we have on the far left side Lars Christensen. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're doing great.
And on my right, this young gentleman, Mr. Flemming Rasmussen, correct?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much again to give us this opportunity to chit chat a little bit more on the three brands that's under Audio Group Denmark, Ansus, Avik, and also Borsen. Now, I'll start off with you, Fleming.
Yes.
What would be your philosophy in designing the Avik amplifiers?
I don't think I have any specific philosophy for a certain product. It's more like a general approach to design. And I'm relating very much to a very old wise rule that the design must serve the purpose. It is very, very easy, I think, to design something that looks nice, attractive, and sexy and all that. But if you're a good designer, you have in your mind all the time what the product's going to be used for. Like it would be ridiculous if I designed an amplifier that was this high and very cool, very sexy looking, and it would turn into a nightmare for Michael to get the right electronics into that box. So the design must not compromise the ideal solution from a technical point. And you see a lot of examples of manufacturers doing that because they want a specific design, and
Yes.
then the engineer just have to do the best he can. You know? So, but I learned that in my previous life, where I designed a lot of Class A amplifiers, and they're big amplifiers, and they're big for a reason, because they cannot be small.
Right.
I mean, nobody is making a 200 watt pure Class A amplifier in the analog world that is small and cool.
Yeah.
It is big and heavy, that's how it is. So that's my approach to it. But it just makes it more interesting, because then you have to combine that rule in your head with the aesthetics. Try to make something that is big and heavy look elegant at the same time. I mean, I'm fighting with that all my life, and I try to dress up, you know.
No.
So that's a real challenge.
Okay, that is good. Now, a generic question to anyone who wants to answer: integrated versus pre and power. Anyone want to take that?
I think that is not straightforward, and yet it's very simple. There's no doubt if you have twice the space, you can create better products. There's no doubt if you create better products and you have good interlinks, it's a better solution with the pre and power. But there's also an advantage with something that is smaller and more compact and in one box, depending on who the clients are, who the customer are, and how much they want a visible system or a non-visible system. I think for some areas in the market, integrated solutions are good. For higher end, we tend to drift more towards ultimate products, and then you drift into pre and power.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I mean, I do agree actually. When you have more space to work with, your design can even be more thoughts can be put in your design philosophy and so on with the pre and power. But okay, now on your website it states there Scandinavian design with an international touch. Now, what do you mean by that?
I think that Flemming brings the international touch in a way, because My designs have always been very lean, very simplistic, very KISS.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Keep it simple, stupid. Where Flemming is much more the artist, and he brings all the wild ideas or wilder ideas. But yet, when you see all that, in my opinion, Flemming has done, it's been done in a very tasteful way.
Okay, all right. Now, I also had the experience listening to the Epic Amps, I think a few years back in the EV show back in KL, and also again in Audio Perfectionist showroom and so on. If you are being asked the question, what is so unique about the design, what would be the answer?
I think that it is the simplicity, as Mike was saying. Let's say no nonsense design, and we are not putting a lot of decorations on it. I mean, I know from my background on the Art Academy that a good drawing is a drawing with few lines is catching the object.
Right.
And often, if you're not getting that right, it is very, very tempting to make a lot of nice and sexy details to hide that you actually do not have the concept correct.
Yeah.
And it's the same here. I mean, you can make an amplifier and then you can put all kinds of ornamentation on it, and it's the only purpose it serves, it's decoration. I don't think that this is the way that Michael and I are working at all. I mean, there's nothing that is not supposed to be there. But the things that are supposed to be there, we try to make them in such a way that they're nice to look at.
Right.
It used to be so in high end, and I've been in high end for like 1,000 years, that in the beginning, best amplifiers, best sounding amplifiers was looking terrible. Because they were always back, done by engineers. And a different breed of engineers than Michael, because Michael has a very developed aesthetic skills.
Yeah.
But the typical engineer at that time, he was just concerned about circuitry and trying to avoid that the amplifier was exploding. And that was it. And the audiophiles at that time, they didn't really care. I remember one guy I was speaking with from a company called Mondial, and he said, well, the rule is that the ugly amplifier sounds great, and if an advertisement and marketing is really poor, it's really good products. Because the kind of people who make good products do not understand advertising. And that was difficult for me when I entered the business, because I did not have the technical background. And really did not have the curiosity. So I found people who did. You don't have to be good at everything if you have the ability to find people that are.
Understood. Yeah.
And so I designed some products that at that time was pretty sophisticated in terms of design. And the products was often excused, I mean, if I make cool designs, but do they sound good? Not because it sounded bad, but there was like a resistance right away. Like people say, well, that's a blonde girl, she's probably stupid.
Perception.
So you're up against that kind of things, and thanks God that has changed. The girls never were stupid, but I think that high end is turning slowly, very slowly, into a professional business. But it's still driven much by emotions, and it's a very, there's still a lot of superstition and stupid stories.
Of course,
There are more opinions than there are know-how. And if you look at the first digital amplifiers, they had a really, really hard time. And trying to get past that, and these guys, they went past it a long, long time ago. You still have to fight it. You have to prove more than anyone else. If you come with an analog amplifier, you don't have to prove anything. But it's also, in terms of technology, but it's also a strange situation that you have cutting edge digital technology working together to choose. So it's like a space rocket, you know, next to a T-Rex. That I think is a challenge, but it's interesting.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
I think that even in analog amplifiers, there are still a lot of superstition in a way. Now we have made a integrated 200 watt class A amplifier that runs pretty cool.
Yeah.
And people cannot understand and get past that, oh, you have 200 watt class A, but it's not hot. How is that
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah.
But people misunderstand a lot that class A needs to be hot. No, class A does not need to be hot. It needs to be non-switching. You need to keep the output devices on all the time. That is per definition class A. And you can do that very hot, but you can also do it quite cold.
Right.
And the ability and the technology to do it quite cold is something that we have been mastering for a number of years. But still, there's a little bit of superstition in that.
It's
How is that
also
possible?
sometimes been misused. I mean, I remember with my previous projects that there were so many claiming, well, I have this amplifier, it's 200 watt, pure class A, and it's cold as ice cream. And there were so many false claims about class A because you were trying, you know, to lift the product.
Yeah.
And it's only until recently, you know, that people like Michael has proven that is not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
But it used to be the situation.
No, that I totally agree. I mean, to be frank, I myself, so the perception about Class A amplifiers has always been hot, and it's not going to be a good market for Malaysia. We are a hot country.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and there's always that joke, you can fry an egg on that Class A amplifier.
But in class A, there's two ways of making it. You can make sure that you have so much current in the output devices that you need to pull a lot of current before they should start switching. But you can also make sure that the bias is so stable that it never goes down to where you have to deplete the base charge and have to empty device and that it's always on. So there's sort of like, depending on where you spend your energy in the idle situation, you could spend it in the output devices, but you could also spend your energy in the driver circuitry. And if you do that, you can easily make something that stays on where the output devices never switches, regardless how much power you pull from it.
Yeah.
And I think the latter is the most sensible. But in hi-fi, most companies have been making the same amplifiers they did 20 years ago, and they still do today. It's exactly the same circuitry, it's the same bias circuitry, and not a lot of development is going on there. But I think it's a little bit about how we talked a little bit earlier about being curious to find out what is it really that matters, rather than just going and say, okay, we have this, we know it works, let's do it. I mean, if you look at things without, it's a little bit the picture, you buy a boat, it floats, so it must be good. There's no need to pull it on shore and look in the bottom if there's any damages.
Yeah.
I think you need to examine things to a deeper level to get a deeper understanding, and if you don't spend time and have the curiosity, it's a little bit about the same with the playground that we talked about with the materials also.
Yeah.
If you don't actually listen to a plate or a piece or darks in a certain material, you don't know.
Yeah, agree, totally agree. And that's another thing about the epic amps. Nowadays, especially in Malaysia, not everyone has a dedicated listening room. In general, most of the audiophiles in Malaysia will have the hi-fi setup in the lounge or the living room. I myself as well moved out from a dedicated room to a living room now, which the wife acceptance factor plays a role. You know, and the Avic amps is designed such that it looks nice. It's very visible with those red LED lights, and it's not bulky. That's one thing unique about those amps that I particularly like. Now, question to Lars.
Yeah.
I've seen all these I series, the 180, 280s, and the 580s. Something caught my eye during the Munich High-End show. You want to talk a little bit on that particular amp?
Yeah. I think we hear what we see in general, and it's where people manufacturers are not careful enough with the materials that are used. I don't know, over the years I've got a special sense, so when I knock on something or feel it, I know if it's something good or bad. And there's no doubt about when you see this, even where we start with I-180, it's a masterpiece in mechanics. We are limiting aluminum to a minimum. It's still used some in certain places. We try to keep it out of the loom, so to say, to get it far away where it doesn't hurt anything. But there's materials which sound really good. Titanium, for example, is one of them. Copper sounds good. Gold sounds good. I thought for many years silver was not good sounding. I was wrong. Silver is good sounding when you use it right. So materials, it's used anywhere in the setup. You hear it. There's no doubt. You know, I don't know why, but we see a lot of designs today getting more and more heavy, and they're really proud when they make an amplifier for 250 kilos. They use 150 kilos of aluminium, and for me, aluminium is a bad material. If you knock on a plate made in aluminium, it sounds very bad and dead. And you have never seen any instrument made in aluminium.
Aluminium, correct?
They use bronze, they use different other materials like silver and gold, and these materials are sounding good. So our amps are not only an electrical piece, but it's for sure also a very mechanical piece. Michael is an expert in making sure we have the right height on the piece of electronics. It doesn't matter if the power distribution bar or it's an amplifier or speaker, has the dimension have to be right. So you hear what you see. And it's that direction a lot of companies are talking about. Let's say around the speakers, they're talking about cabinets are, you know, high tech. We don't think it's high tech, because Michael can more or less simulate how the airflow is in a speaker and can make the calculation for it. But what worries me is actually that a lot of manufacturers are still claiming it's high tech.
Right.
And it's even worse when you start to use the aluminium. It's a bad material, and it makes on the lineage in the structure of the harmonics to even the highest note to the deepest note. And now we can easily detect when something is damned and when something is not damned. So we don't really believe in damping. A damping resonance, if you damp them all, you'll have no music.
The music. Correct. Okay. Now, what would be the latest product under AVIC amps that you introduce?
There will be some really beautiful products coming. We're going to have a DAC streamer coming up. We're going to have a fantastic photo stage coming up. And by the way, these two guys, they're playing around with monoblocks right now.
Okay.
And we expect some of these products, some of them maybe show up later this year or at least next year. So we will have a full range of what's needed.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. My introduction of AVIC back home in Malaysia has always been amps and the digital side of things. To be frank, when I arrived here, this is the first time I know that, you know, AVIC is also going into analogs and so on. How about the source itself, turntable? Is there anything on that?
Mike came to me, I think it's maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. We're going to make a turntable, Lars. Yes, good.
15 years ago.
And of course Mike came up with some ideas, and some of this design ideas I really didn't like because I don't know, I see for proportions of things.
Right.
I think speaker have to have a certain depth, certain height, certain width to have the golden issue, so to say, to hit it right. And the same with the turntable. But I'm sure that one day, now we have two guys designing a turntable. But now we have more layers, we have a 3D printing as well. So Michael is starting to rethink the turntable from scratch again.
Wow.
And it's a lot of times where I'm coming in, because we move so fast. I mean, your friends from Malaysia, they were here for 1.5 months ago, and we didn't have the M1 up and running. We have a prototype of it. We didn't have the 880s up and running, and for sure they have no clue about the X3 Wilson speaker. So we move fast.
Right.
But the turntable, we have made the vision. It has to be damn good.
Yes.
And you have to design-wise shine. And there's nothing which is so mechanical as a turntable. And that's why Michael is an expert. And then we had this crazy guys design on top of it. So I think we'll do great when it's one day will be available.
Right, yeah. Like you've always mentioned before, if you want to do something, make sure it's 100% into it and you'll be the best.
I think a good example is that when we started going into streaming, I think that was sort of like when we broke into making sources. And of course a turntable is a source, and we need that in the AV program, and there will be a turntable one day. The problem is, as Lars says, that we learn new things all the time, so there's always a new layer we can put into it.
Yeah.
And designing the M speaker is a good example. We knew that we were gonna make an M speaker, but it was not until recently the tools were available to do it.
Okay.
So I think it's okay to have visions and have ideas and have plans, but before you can execute the plan, the tools that you need to be there need to be in place in the company.
Yeah.
To make the M speaker, we needed the basket, we needed the membrane, and all these things. In order to do that, takes time and R&D and more time. And then when you do a design, you need more time because you need to have it parked in a way, in a period where nothing happens. And then you take it up and look at it again and says, was this really what I wanted to make? Or is this still in sync? Or is this design still flying? And I think that having that patience and develop the tools on an analog side is even more important.
I have a comment to this one because I think we have looking at the drawings minimum 20,000 times. So I hope your home question. I'm sure we will. It will be though.